All right. Thank you everyone for being here. So just a reminder, our primary objective here is to build a community and help support the development of women leaders in the battery industry. So you'll see that today's event is designed for engagement and participation. So throughout the event, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, especially in the beginning, and then be ready to participate during our meet and greet session once that starts in about 5 or 10 minutes. And now that you've joined us, a friendly reminder to update your display name with your affiliation so that it'll be easier for everyone to make new friends and expand your professional network. All right, let's get started. So we have about 100 people in the room, which is very exciting. I'm sure more will join in the next couple of minutes. So welcome to our second Women in Batteries interview. The format for today is we'll spend the first 10 minutes on our meet and greet segment where you'll be randomly matched with a few new friends. And then we will hear from our incredible guest, Sarah, the CSO of Livent. We'll have a main interview portion and then some time for your questions. And then finally, we'll finish up with some announcements about jobs and other opportunities, followed by some more open networking. So before we start our meet and greet, I'd like to introduce you to the Women in Batteries project by Volta Foundation, created to bring together and empower women like yourself in the battery space to create positive change. Our goal for the interview series is to highlight incredible role models in the industry and also, most importantly, to create a community of women leaders that is able to come together, support, and learn from each other and help make the industry a welcoming and very positive place for everyone. So it's really important that by the end of this meeting, not only have you learned something from Sarah, but that you've also made some new amazing friends and expanded your network. So I encourage you to all stay till the end of the event and to connect further with others. Women in Batteries is one of the 14 projects hosted by the Volta Foundation. Volta is a nonprofit supporting the growth of the battery space. The foundation hosts a large number of events all over the world, like in the US, Europe, China, and even India, as well as a large portfolio of publications like the Battery Report and Battery Bits, and This Week in Batteries. Everything we do is open access, which we're really proud of, and we're dedicated to helping individuals just like you advance in your career. Our projects are maintained and organized by this amazing team of Volta staff who are both volunteers and full-time members, and each person on here is an absolute rock star. We're supported by our partners and member companies, so thank you so much to these organizations, especially those of them here today, for helping make all of our work possible. That leads us to our first segment, the meet and greet. So this event is designed around community building, as I mentioned. So in that spirit, you're highly encouraged to use the chat feature in Zoom to reach out to individuals and to add each other on LinkedIn. In a minute, you'll be automatically moved to a breakout room with about 3 other people. So please get ready to unmute and share a little bit about yourself with your new battery friends. And on the screen here, you'll see some prompts to help you chat with others. So just give me a little bit of time to create these rooms. There we go. I think we're all set up. All right, everyone. I'm finally excited to introduce to you all our guest of honor, Sarah Maryssael. Sarah is the Chief Strategy Officer at Livent, where she's responsible for leading efforts to grow the business globally, as well as leading Livent's strategy and commercial operations in North America and contributing to Quebec's ambitions as a leader in the integrated lithium and battery supply chain. Prior to joining Livent, Sarah led Tesla's strategic sourcing of lithium and other battery metals for its global battery supply chain for about 5 years. She also had a lead role in scaling Tesla's cathode roadmap. We have the great privilege today to welcome Sarah, a distinguished and pioneering leader in the battery space, whose expertise and contributions have been instrumental to shaping the future of batteries. Welcome, Sarah, and thank you for being here. How are you doing? What's your state of charge today?
Well, thank you, first of all, for giving me the opportunity to speak in front of this audience, and I'm very excited to be here. I'd say I'm probably doing pretty well. I'm about an 80. Never want to go above charge a battery over 80. And I'd say I've just recovered from a cold. And so, yeah, I'm doing well. Thank you for asking.
Perfect. Glad the interview came in time after you've recovered. I think all of us are struggling with some colds in our families. All right, thank you. So let's start with a little bit about yourself. Can you share a little bit about your journey in the industry, including your early on experiences, your time at Tesla, and some pivotal moments during the years of growth that you experienced at Tesla?
Sure. So I'm Australian, as some of you might pick up from the accent. I grew up in Perth, Western Australia, and I went then across to Melbourne after high school to study chemical engineering and science. I graduated then back in 2008. And joined ExxonMobil straight out of college, which is kind of ironic because yesterday they just announced that they were getting into lithium, and that was almost 15 years ago now. So ironic how that's sort of come full circle. But I didn't actually stay at ExxonMobil for too long, because I got an opportunity to join Vale, which is a large diversified mining company. At the time, they were starting up and commissioning a new nickel project in New Caledonia. For those of you who don't know where New Caledonia is, it's an island in the southwestern Pacific. It's sort of just off the coast of Queensland in Australia. It's a French sort of territory, or the overseas country, as it tends to be referred to, that has very, very large deposits of nickel, similar to Indonesia, Philippines, and Papua New Guinea, where you see also a lot of nickel production coming out of those countries. So I got the opportunity to go work there as a young sort of process engineer, and learn really the ropes of commissioning and starting up a brand new hydrometallurgical facility in the South Pacific, which was a fantastic experience. And sort of from there, my career kind of took a turn somewhat for the unexpected. I went off and did an MBA in 2015 at a time when commodity prices were quite low. A lot of mining companies were pulling back on investments. It was just not a great time in the mining industry to try and grow your career. So I thought it would be a good time to take a pause and go seek further education. And I wanted to become a bit more business oriented. So I went to do an MBA at INSEAD in France. After that, I decided to go into management consulting, just as a way, I think, to extend sort of my business and commercial skills. Having had been an engineer for about 5-6 years prior to that, I kind of wanted more an opportunity to develop that business acumen and sort of reposition, I think, my career to do something a bit more strategic focus, maybe less technical. And then sort of not long after I joined BCG, I was fortunate enough to be contacted by a recruiter at Tesla. I was based in Sydney at the time when I was at BCG, and I just returned to Australia after many years abroad. But then the opportunity to join Tesla was just something I couldn't really resist back in 2017, back when Tesla was still, I would say, relatively unknown. And I think no one had really sort of not everyone was convinced of the EV revolution. So it was really in the early days before sort of Tesla grew to what it became today.
Mm-hmm. And during your time at Tesla, as you mentioned, it was a new company and it was in a significant growth phase. What were the challenges and key learnings you encountered within this rapidly expanding company?
I think what was exciting about working in a company like Tesla, and I think even in just batteries and EVs, was it really was that period, I would say, from about 2018, 2019, just before the pandemic, to when the pandemic started, was really a turning point, because that, I think, was really cemented in people's minds that the energy transition was real. EVs were no longer just something for that a small percentage of consumers were interested in. You were seeing sort of mass adoption and mass sort of growth of EV adoption within that period of time, which I think was quite unprecedented, particularly during the period of COVID. And that's when Tesla started its Shanghai Gigafactory. And so that was really got a very strong foothold in China at that point. which I think was really what helped, I think, the EV industry credentialize itself, and I think really cement its position. I think what was exciting about working in a company like that during that time was just the intense growth that the company and the industry was experiencing. And I think what I enjoyed about that was there was really no roadmap for what the industry was doing. No one had done this before. There was no predefined way or process of doing this. I think we were figuring out everything as we went along. We were learning about the supply chain, who were the key players in the supply chain, and all these companies in the supply chain, cathode companies, raw material companies, a lot of them were also growing in line with EV demand. So we were all sort of experiencing this period of growth, still are, but not really knowing all about these partnerships. So a lot of the time was spent building relationships, traveling to Asia, traveling to Japan, to Korea, to China, visiting raw material manufacturing locations, building relationships with these companies to really understand how does it work, how do we make the supply chain fit together, because ultimately no company can work in isolation. The success of a supply chain really comes down to the relationships that you build between companies and between individuals.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely sounds like an exciting time. So regarding you scaled and helped build an entire supply chain. What are the specific challenges you faced and how did you navigate them? And have the challenges changed today?
Yeah, it was interesting because at the time, we were speaking to a number of the large, mining companies, that produce, that time, nickel, cobalt was still, and lithium. I mean, they still do. And a lot of these mining companies had never really had to serve the automotive industry directly. And so there really was a period, I would say, of learning on both sides, both on the upstream side, when you look at these mining companies, and you look on the downstream side, whether it be sort of cathode manufacturers, cell manufacturers, or OEMs, learning, I think, about each other's business, and realizing that there's both of them are, I mean, on either side of the value chain, things are very, very different. If you look on the upstream side, mining projects take anywhere from at least 10 years from discovery through exploration, through resource definition, through fundraising, construction, until they start producing. And 10 years, I think, is even an ambitious target. They can take a lot longer. On the other hand, you're building gigafactories that are, gigafactories take about 2 years to build on average. So you're seeing this big sort of disconnect between the way you allocate capital, the way that projects are being built on the mining side versus projects more on the downstream side. And so how do you sort of educate one another about your relatively very different business models, but ultimately you need to find a way to work together and make the supply chain work. So there's been a lot of time, I think there was a lot of, in those initial years, educating one another, teaching what was this business like, what were the challenges, what were the opportunities, and I think ultimately finding ways to partner, which we were successful in doing and building that supply chain. But I think those challenges continue to remain, and I'm sure we'll probably get into that a little bit more. But I think the continued challenges really around raw materials and mining is just these very, very long lead times to get these projects off the ground. It's a very capital intensive nature, and you're subject to very volatile prices. You look at lithium today. We were riding a high on lithium about a year ago, and today, lithium prices are about as low as they've been in the last 2-3 years. And so with that volatility comes a lot of uncertainty. We're seeing now that OEMs pulling back on investment or delaying investments, or re-questioning what their demand and their plans, and that has a knock-on effect on the upstream. So riding through this volatility, this uncertainty, I think will continue to remain a challenge for the industry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree. The volatility aspect is very difficult, and I think we'll get more a little bit into the intricacies of the mining industry in a few minutes here. I want to come back to your early on experiences. I'd like to speak about what encouraged you to switch from more technical role to a strategic role, and what importance did your very technical experiences play in that transition in your career?
I honestly had some of the best learning experiences as a young process engineer. trying to start up a plant. I think it was a fantastic environment, I think, to develop professionally in the early years of my career. And I think having a good, and I've always been a big advocate for, specifically for women in STEM degrees, because even if you don't do that, even for the rest of your career, I think it provides a really, really strong foundation in terms of problem solving, comfort with ambiguity. I think that is the most important thing, because generally when you're solving problems as an engineer or as a scientist, you don't have a lot of information up front, but you have to learn to be resourceful and find that information, draw a hypothesis, find and develop a solution. And I think that skill set, I think, is really second to none. And spending the initial years of your career developing that really sets you up for the future. It allows you, I think, ultimately to pivot into different parts of, into business, into negotiations, into sales and marketing, really into a very diverse field. So I think having spent those early years, and I know there's women on this panel, on the audience today who I know who've had a similar sort of trajectory as I have, and I'm sure that they would say the same, that having a very strong foundation technically upfront really can set you up for success later in your career.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And in terms of, when the women on this call or young professionals are choosing what kind of company to work for, can you give us a little bit of insight into that? So you've worked at very well-established companies like BCG and in the dynamic environment of Tesla. So how can we navigate major career decisions and think about working at a startup versus a very well-established company? What are the things to consider there?
I really don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I think it really depends on the stage of your career. I think, moving to Tesla, I was at a stage in my career, I felt that I had done a number of years in larger organizations and was ready for a little bit more, for a change in pace. I think, look, they offer very different, they give you exposure to very different skills. I think in a large established company, you learn things that are, more process focused. I think you build a very good foundation. I think in a more entrepreneurial type of company, you have the ability to really own your role, and I think to really sort of drive the direction for a company. I think you've got a lot less constraints. You have a lot more freedom, but with that also I think comes also a lot more risk. So I think that there really isn't a right answer, but I think having had exposure to both, I think it's allowed me, I think, to be a more well-rounded professional, and I very much value that the skills I've learned in both of those environments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it definitely has probably helped you in now your more senior strategic role as well, having experienced those two environments. All right, so now that we've talked a little bit about your career and your past in the industry, we can jump a little bit more into the mining aspect. So can you tell us, why is mining so crucial for various industries and the battery supply chain, and what challenges does the upstream industry face?
Yeah, I am. This is something very a passion of mine, very close to my heart. I think, when you think about I've always seen the mining industries as the ability for human civilization to progress. I think if you see at the big leaps in technological advancement of human civilization, it's often come down to our ability to unlock certain minerals from the earth. You look at the Iron Age, you look at the Copper Age. And you look today, I think it's similarly at the Lithium Age, right? I think our ability to bring more lithium and critical minerals, I think, to market really that's what's going to enable an acceleration of our transition to sustainable energy. Mining and the minerals that we use underpin every single item that we own, that we depend on, that we rely on, our laptops, our phones. Everything in our house is made essentially from minerals produced in the earth. So I think that there's a very elegant narrative about the importance of mining in our day-to-day lives, and it's not just about technological items, but it also helps unlock living standards and improve living standards for many people around the world. So it's something that we all directly or indirectly depend on. Specifically, I think for the battery industry, it's clear that we're moving away from the age of fossil fuels to the age of critical minerals. And you're seeing that by the intense interest there is around critical minerals from a geopolitical perspective. You see that the level of discussion that it now holds on a global stage. And you're seeing, for example, the work that's been put out by the International Energy Agency. You're seeing sort of the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a really sort of, prioritizing the production of critical minerals outside of foreign entities of concern. You're seeing this really become the dominant topic, not just because we need it for batteries, but this really is the future of energy security. And our ability to move to a green economy. So I could speak about this for hours, but I think once you get an appreciation of how dependent our lives are on mining, I think it was just something that I was very excited to be a part of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, definitely. And as you said, mining is so critical. And you mentioned previously that to get a mining project up and running, it takes about 10 years versus the 2 years for a battery factory, for example. So we see a lot of news coming out about projections when a certain chemistry is coming onto the market, when it will be commercialized. Do you think there's a disconnect between the downstream and upstream? Can we reach those objectives and goals that they often announce for different cell chemistries?
I do think there is a disconnect. I think a lot has been talked about solid state batteries being sort of the next iteration to unlock more energy, high energy densities from current lithium ion battery technologies. Solid state batteries use a lithium metal anode, which is a very different, I would say, material to handle than the graphite that we use today. And lithium metal, high purity lithium metal today forms a very, very, very small, I would say, share of the total production of lithium chemicals. But we don't really talk about that. And so for solid state batteries to be able to scale effectively, despite, all the other challenges, which I'm not certainly qualified to speak about, but certainly from a supply chain aspect, if you just look at the availability of lithium metal, there's not enough lithium metal today to justify being able to scale quickly solid state batteries. We are still having a lithium shortage, what we perceive to be a lithium shortage on the cathode side for lithium hydroxide and lithium carbonate. We have to solve that first. Until we solve that, then we can pivot to thinking about how we bring on lithium metal production. And the lithium metal production is also concentrated within very, very few players today. There's been a lot of announcements of lithium hydroxide supply, but not so much on lithium metal. So that could also become a key constraint. And lithium metal in itself is a very reactive substance. How do we transport it? And the logistics of getting it from a producer to an electrode manufacturer is something we need to think through. So there's a number of examples of this. You look at manganese as well. We talk very extensively about manganese-rich chemistry as also being the next iterations of cathodes, but manganese rich require manganese sulfate, and today there's a lot of manganese ore production, but there's very, very limited manganese sulfate refining capacity, and making manganese sulfate is a very challenging material. And there's not that much capacity. A lot of that capacity is concentrated in China. So it's always interesting when I read in the news about these announcements of what's the next big breakthrough lithium ion technology. And the question we need to ask ourselves is the supply chain, has enough been invested in the supply chain to make sure that we can deliver on those technology plans?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think from what I'm hearing is we need to take a more practical approach when discussing the next big innovation. I think the industry gets very excited by new chemistries, new technologies, and that forms often a disconnect between what's actually doable and achievable. Mm-hmm. Now I wanted to talk a little bit about women, since we have so many women here today in our meeting. So in your current role, where do you see the lithium industry from a career perspective, and what opportunities does it present for women?
I think what made me join the lithium industry after Tesla was having worked in a major large mining companies, having dealt with a lot of large mining companies, they tend to be a lot more legacy established mining companies with, I think, a much more risk-averse view towards a multiple number of things. What I like about lithium is it's a lot more entrepreneurial. I think as an industry that is starting very, very small, lithium was virtually unknown, I would say, until about 10 years ago with the sort of growth of lithium-ion batteries. You've had a lot of small companies jump in, and because it's been a relatively small industry that's had to grow very, very quickly, I think quicker than a lot of existing raw materials that are used in batteries today, you've had to develop a very entrepreneurial spirit. And you see that, I think, resonated through a lot of the companies. And I find that really exciting because you're bringing an entrepreneurial spirit, which I really liked about Silicon Valley. And you're seeing that, I think, infiltrate into a lot of lithium companies today. And I would say junior developers that are trying to grow their business. And I think in a way, they don't have the legacy beliefs or legacy values that a lot of traditional mining companies would have. And so I think that gives lithium companies, and even a lot of raw material companies that are sort of coming of age now, recycling companies, I would include as well in that, I think really redefine how they want to position themselves for this high growth period that we're entering. And with that, there's been a lot of focus on sustainability, sustainable growth, I think inclusion, representation, and I think that really presents an opportunity for women in our industry.
And what challenges do you see in the lithium industry today on this topic specifically?
I think it still continues to be difficult to attract talent. I think that typically mining and chemicals refining has not been the most, I would say, attractive industry. Generally because you're working on remote locations, and I think with sort of with COVID, there's been a lot more of a push to hybrid or to working from home. Manufacturing and mining really requires you to be on site. Requires you to roll up your sleeves and I think get involved. I think it is challenging to attract people into the industry. One, because I think that there's alternative career paths that maybe are more appealing. And I think secondly, the mining industry and the refining industry has not typically had a great reputation. I think there's been some specific incidents which have probably not helped the image. And I think that there's a big effort that we're all going through at the moment trying to attract talent to this industry because it's I think suffered from a number of setbacks over the years. But I think ultimately when you see what the larger, greater purpose of what we're trying to do, I'm hoping that can be a way to motivate people to join us.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And do you have advice for the young women considering a career in mining and refining?
I think there's I would say, look, I think my advice would be, I think explore that there's different ways in which you can get involved in the mining industry or the refining industry. There is no one way. I think, look, it's I would certainly encourage discussions with other people in the industry to find out more. I think it's really about educating yourself and seeing how the industry is changing. The industry does want to change. The industry does want to attract new talent. And I think getting a view of, having the opportunity to speak with a number of people across the industry, and that's something if anyone out there is interested in finding out more, I'd be happy to connect you with other fantastic women that I work with in our industry. I think who'll be able to share their views, and not just women, but certainly I think beyond that, I think use this Volta and the platform it provides to find out as much as you can, because there's a lot of great people that are working in the upstream.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sarah. I'm sure a lot of us will take you up on that and chat to you about the opportunities in this space. Before we head into the lightning round segment, do you have any last insights or advice for those of us thinking of entering the upstream part of batteries?
Maybe just a general piece of advice. I think what I wouldn't have imagined that this role or this what I'm doing today would have existed when I graduated from my MBA about 8 years ago. It goes to show how quickly and how dynamic I think the job market is. And I think an exciting part about entering the job market today is the jobs that will exist in the future. You don't know that they exist today. And so I think, this idea of a 5-year or 10-year career plan doesn't really make sense anymore for many of us, because our industry is so dynamic, and it's very common now to change jobs every 2 to 3 years. So I would just say, look, embrace this period of, I would say, uncertainty and dynamism. And I think take advantage of the opportunities that might come up. Speak to as many people as you can, because the job that you're looking for might not exist today.
Great. Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for the very insightful discussion. Before we switch to Q&A from our audience, I'd like to do a lightning round question segment where you'll quickly answer some fun questions for our audience to get to know you better. Are you ready?
Yes, that's good. Let's do it.
All right. What is your favorite battery metal and why?
I'm going to say cobalt. I think cobalt has been very unloved for the last few years. We've all talked about engineering out cobalt. We've all thought about the reputational issues associated with cobalt in the DRC, but I think that's largely been overblown. I think cobalt is very much a key important battery for cycle life and stability, and I think that ultimately it can be a way to improve the conditions for people in the DRC. So I think that cobalt would have to be my favorite battery metal.
Great. If you could extract one element from the periodic table using a magic wand and turn it into the most efficient and sustainable battery material, which element would it be and why?
I'm probably going to say sulfur, because lithium sulfur batteries I know very, very little about, but I'm extremely interested in the opportunity for lithium sulfur. Sulfur is also a big waste. Sulfate, I should say, is a big waste byproduct. A lot of battery raw materials processing today, with that's lithium, nickel, cobalt recycling. And so if there's a way that we can recover that sulfur, that sulfate, put it back into sulfur, and then somehow make that into lithium sulfur, it would be a very nice, elegant way, I think, to make a more circular economy and diversifying, I think, ultimately different types of lithium ion battery technologies.
That's a good one. Do you have any book recommendations for us?
While on the theme of critical minerals, I would recommend Volta by Henry Sanderson. He was a former Financial Times journalist, and he's just written a very, very insightful book into battery raw materials in the supply chain.
If you were a battery cell, what special performance attribute would you have?
I would say cycle life. I think for me, cycle life is about resilience and endurance. And I think with the challenge that we have ahead with the energy transition, scaling battery production, I think we're all going to need a lot of patience and resilience. So I'm going to say cycle life.
Yeah, I relate definitely. Okay, thank you, Sarah. That was great. I'd now like to open up the floor to our audience to ask any questions. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So everyone just put up your hand and I'll call out the names of the first, whoever's first. Rhonda?
Hi, yeah. So, I mean, a lot of what we've been, as you mentioned, Sarah, there's not enough lithium to go around. What do you, in terms of like strategy and supply chain and mining, where do you see the future for like energy storage versus EV?
I think energy storage doesn't get spoken about nearly as much as it should. I think a lot of the focus has been around EVs. And I think the reason for that is I think EVs is what gets consumers interested, right? People interested in car. As a consumer, you're interested in a car. You'd listen and interested in energy storage. But I think that we could easily see, energy storage is just as important as EVs, and could ultimately account for up to half of global battery deployments. So the challenges, I think, obviously for lithium are only going to increase, particularly with the increase of energy storage. Really, the best solution to this is diversified battery technologies, whether that be sodium ion or different types, because the more diversification we have in these battery technologies is ultimately what's going to limit sort of these supply and demand shocks that we're experiencing.
Thank you.
Junaid, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name.
No, that's absolutely fine. That's pretty much how it said. Hi, Sarah. It's nice to meet you.
Hi.
Just a quick question. What do you see as the biggest advantage to the diversification of portfolio at Livent through the acquisition of Alchem, and what does it mean for the partnership with Namaska
Yeah, so I'll
from a
just clarify
supply
that it's a
chain point of view?
merger. It's a merger of equals with Allchem, but I
Okay.
think this is generally part of a broader trend you're seeing in the organization in the industry of consolidation. And you're seeing this a lot of activity in Australia recently with a lot of announcements we've seen. So I think this is very natural and very normal and necessary for an industry going through a lot of growth that's very fragmented. It's important to consolidate because consolidation means that you can have companies at scale that can ultimately deliver volumes quicker and of high quality, I think, to its customers. So I think this is a very natural evolution. It's a sign of an industry that's on its way to maturing. Ultimately, what does this mean for Namaska? I mean, we hopefully think that it's beneficial. I think we're very committed to Quebec and the opportunities that Canada represents, and ideally that this merger is designed to bring more synergies together and be able to accelerate our projects, be more resource efficient, capital efficient, ultimately to deliver lithium chemicals quicker to the market.
Yes, thank you.
Crystal? Crystal, I think you're muted. All right.
Sorry.
Oh, there we go.
Thank you. I want to ask Sarah, can you share more about your thought process? Just the overall motives and actions that you have to go from technical to strategic. You could elaborate more on that?
Sorry, Crystal, I think you're cutting out. Sarah, did you get that?
Something about a career path moving from technical to strategic, but I missed the earlier part.
Yeah, like your thought process, motive, and actions.
Your thought process, motive, and actions that you took to move from technical to
Yeah, look,
strategic.
I'll give a very honest answer on this. I think I found that being an engineer in a large mining company meant that I saw it challenging for me to I think to be promoted or to move up. I think I felt there were limited opportunities, I think, to get promoted as an engineer. And I thought that if I really wanted to have an impact and grow my career quickly, I needed to pivot away from technical to something a bit more business focused, which was why I went to do an MBA. I did feel the limitations of being a female engineer in a mining company, and that is a lot of the reason why I ultimately left and tried to pursue another path to try and sort of break out through that. So that was ultimately, I would say was my motivation, was having the opportunity to sort of grow my career more quickly, rather than sort of I felt a little bit trapped, I think, probably where I was previously.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Yeah, go ahead, Crystal. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Is it like a mix of the MBA opportunity that you had? Is that what really like manifested your intention to change?
Sorry, Crystal, you're cutting out.
Sorry.
What you said, was it a mix of?
The MBA and the next opportunity that presented itself. Is that really what it was? Like the timing of those two presenting themselves?
It was a decision to do an MBA because I felt that I had done 5 years as an engineer and I felt that I was limited in my growth capabilities and within the company. So I thought an MBA would, one, give me time, I think, to reconsider what I wanted, but also really hone in and develop, I think, very different skills to what I had done in the early part of my career. Then my decision to go into management consulting was really, it was a 1-year MBA. And so I wanted a bit more experience, professional experience in developing, I think, or furthering some of the skills that I'd learned during my MBA. So that was the decision to go into management consulting. And then also to have an ability to work in mining, but from a management consulting where you're sort of working more with leadership teams or C-suite teams at a mining company and helping them think through, for example, an org redesign or helping them through a cost reduction strategy. So I wanted to have a different angle on mining that I had previously in my early career, which was really just from an operational perspective.
Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. As it's nearing 12, it's time to wrap up our questions. So thank you very much, Sarah, for taking the time to share your insights. Your accomplishments in the space are incredible. And I think we all feel empowered to pursue a career in battery, specifically in the upstream. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for your time. Thanks for joining.
Great. And a couple of items before open networking. I'd like to invite everyone to our next interview event in January with Barbara Hughes, VP of Energy Storage at Forge Nano. Yen will post a link in the chat, so please feel free to RSVP and share the event with your friends. I'll give everyone a few moments to do that. I think Yen just posted it. I'll post it as well. All right, thank you. And then another note, our Battery Career Fair is also coming up in spring, where you get a chance to connect with well-known companies looking for talent. So there's another link in the chat right now if you'd like to register. All right, perfect. Thank you everyone again for attending the Women in Batteries interview series. I hope to see you all at the next one. And so for the next 15 minutes, we'll keep the main room open for open networking. So please feel free to stay for a few minutes to connect and grow your network. Thank you again, everyone, for coming. And thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone. God bless.
Thank you, Sarah. That was awesome.